Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome on SNUI for another beautiful talk. Our guest tonight is Minister Jackie Wright, and she will give to us a very interesting talk on Franz Anton Mesmer and his contribution to mediumship. I want to inform you that this class is recorded, so it is up to you if you want to keep your camera on or off. At the end of her talk, Jackie will give to you the opportunity to ask your question, and you could do that just raising your hand, and I will unmute you immediately. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jackie. Welcome on SNUI, and I give to you the platform.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you, SNUI, for inviting me to do a talk on what is really my passion. And when we are teaching, those of you who are teachers out there of mediumship and healing mediumship, we frequently ask students to get in their power, to sit in the power, to be in the power. Yet very rarely do we tell them what sitting in the power really is, where it originates from, and the history of it. And I have a talk I want to present to you this evening that is based on my investigations into a very interesting man who was not a spiritualist or a medium, but was a man who had a great inquiring mind and discovered something that hundreds of years down the line were going to be of great help to all of us in the mediumistic and healing field. Franz Anton Mesmer is a man who is a very flawed man. He is a man with a lot of issues, shall we say, but nevertheless he had a great brain. So if you'll bear with me, and I'm going to take you on a short journey of his life, a very short journey because of time. I'm going to focus on the important aspects, and then I'm going to bring you up to date on what his discovery brought to us in our unique field. And as Daniela said, after that, you can ask questions should you wish. So Franz Anton Mesmer was born in 1734. If you Google Mesmer, most Google sites will tell you he was born in Germany. Some will tell you he was born in Switzerland, and others will tell you he was born in Austria. So this was a man who got about because he was born in 3 different countries, allegedly. But after my investigation into him, I very much passionately believe he was Austrian. And the reason I say he was Austrian and not German, forgive me all you German lovely people, is because of the way the boundaries were in the 1700s. Germany wasn't really the country it is today in that time. And because of how the boundaries fell between the different hamlets and towns and countries, it meant that after talking to historians, it shows that Mesmer was actually born on the border of Austria, making him Austrian. But I will leave that up to you all to claim him if you wish to. You may not want to when I tell you all about him. Mesmer had 2 loves in his life, neither were his wife. He married a lady for money so that he could pursue his passions. His passions were healing, he was a physician, but also astronomy. Story has it that one evening while watching the planets and the moon, he said to himself, it was almost like a eureka moment or a light bulb moment. And he said to himself, if that moon can control the waves and the tide, if that moon has some kind of magnetic pull to the ebb and flow of the tide, does the same moon have a magnetic influence on people? Now, Today's world, we know that it does. But in 1734, well, a little bit later, because he was a man by then, it wasn't known like it is now. So Mesmer, with his inquiring mind, set about trying to discover if his theory was true or not. And he had various elaborate experiments he did. And at this point, I just want to introduce you to, oops, I'm just a little bit quick there, one of his most famous experimental apparatus, shall we call it. And this is quite a modern one compared to the original one he used. So let me just tell you a little bit of background here. There was a lady in Austria by the name of, let me try and remember her name. Francesca Osterlin, sorry, forgive me, I got a blank there. Francesca Osterlin had various mental, emotional issues. She was diagnosed by the medical profession of suffering from hysteria, which was also diagnosed, wait for this ladies, you will love this, also diagnosed as having a wandering womb or a wandering uterus, which basically meant she had lost interest in any desire for a husband. And so therefore he sent her off to the doctor to find out if she was mad or not. Because if she didn't fancy her husband anymore, there's got to be something wrong. In today's world, it would be called the menopause, of course. But in them days, it was called hysteria, it was called the wandering womb, and the lady had a problem, not the man. So she went in desperation to Mesmer and asked him for help. And Mesmer did various experiments with her. One was that he got her to drink a preparation and in this preparation it had iron filings. And he told her to drink that, and he tried to see if the iron had any effect on her body. He then got a little bit elaborate, and he built in his home a big baquette. It was really a big bathtub originally. And he said to Francesca, take off your clothes, get into the bath. Except it wasn't a bath filled with water. This bath had broken glass, iron filings, and water in it. Now, the jury is out whether he really thought this had a healing effect or whether he just liked having naked ladies in the bathtub. But anyway, we can also decide that on another day. So she would sit in this bathtub and he would bring in then 4 copper rods that had been magnetized. He would place them at various places in the bathtub, and believe it or not, it started to have an effect, but he wasn't sure how it was having an effect. This in front of you now is a later, more modern design. He got clever after that. He put a lid on it because he wanted to look after the lady's modesty, because his reputation was failing. And he enclosed the patient within this baquette, this bathtub. It's still on display at a museum in Lyon, in France. And yeah, it looks pretty brutal, doesn't it? Nevertheless, think of it as you will, but Francesca got well. Her husband was very pleased, and they lived happily ever after. And so the story goes on. There is a story of a young girl, and this young girl was blind. She was a brilliant pianist, an 18-year-old girl called Maria Paradis. She was the daughter of a wealthy politician, shall you say, in Austria, and he was heartbroken that this beautiful daughter of his could not see. So he offered a king's ransom to anybody who could restore her sight. 2 people took up the challenge. One was a father, Johann Gassner, who was a German priest. He was an expert in exorcisms and in faith healing. And he said, yes, I can restore her sight. Mesmer said, so can I. So Maria's father gave them both the opportunity. Father Johann had his time, and he prayed and he did his different experiments with her, and nothing changed. She never got her sight back. Mesmer had his time with her, and her sight returned. He did his experiments with her using his iron filings and his copper rods, and her sight came back. Except she could no longer play the piano. Her music ability was lost. So instead of Mesmer being given all this wealth that he thought he would, he was actually banned from Austria. He was told never to come back. So Mesmer had to then roam Europe. And what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when a new technique comes onto the market, you think of any technique over the years that has become new to the market, it becomes very expensive, doesn't it? It can only be afforded by certain people. So Mesmer took his technique, which he was calling mesmerism, around to different countries, and he was gaining very, very good support with it. The King of France adored him, Marie Antoinette loved him, and in different countries he was celebrated by the rich and famous. So let's pick on Daniela for if we can. So let's say Daniela is a very rich lady, and her husband is out seeing to his land and his wealth, and she's bored. So what she would do is she would invite Mesmer to come to her home to do his technique, which we're going to talk about more in a moment. And then an hour later, she would invite her friends to come for tea. Her friends would turn up, and Daniela would greet them and say, "Forgive me if I appear a little vague. I have just been mesmerized." And that is where we get the noun mesmer, mesmerize, mesmerizing from Anton Mesmer. Because the effect this would have would be to relax the body and relax the mind. Because of his love of women, because of his notoriety in that way, Mesmer quickly became disgraced. All the doctors and scientists who once really appreciated this technique started to turn against him. Let's fast forward a little bit. There was a French man, and forgive my pronunciation, but a French man called Dupotet, who really had a fascination in Mesmer's theory. He brought it to the shores of England, where he met with a man who is very close to my heart, a Dr. John Elliotson. Dr. John Elliotson treated patients with epilepsy. Now in England, in them times, if you had epilepsy, you were not ill, you were mad. So you were locked in an asylum. Elliotson believed you were ill, and he was desperately looking for some kind of technique, some kind of healing that could restore people's health in this way. Dupotet told him all about this guy called Mesmer. He showed Elliotson what Mesmer's technique was, and Elliotson went about experimenting. To his surprise, he discovered that these patients suffering with epilepsy got well. The epileptic episodes stopped. Problem was, because this technique was a little different, the medical board in England at that time in London said to Elliotson, stop practicing or leave medicine altogether. Elliotson decided he would leave medicine altogether. And what he did was he opened up his own clinic in London based only on Mesmer's technique for the practice and the experimenting of that. And he continued to treat epileptics. But Elliotson discovered something else. He discovered that certain patients. Yes, they got well, that was true. But they also had the ability to go into the trance state. They also had the ability to remote view. They had the ability to contact the unseen world. And Elliotson was amazed. He did not know how this was happening. While all this was going on and this was becoming very popular in Britain, by this time Mesmer was disgraced. He was living in Germany, where he eventually had a stroke and died in 1815. But as this was happening to Mesmer, in England, magnetism, as it began to be known, animal magnetism, was becoming very, very popular. And it became popular for every medium to have their own magnetizer. And a lot of you here tonight will have heard of animal magnetism. You will have heard about magnetic passes. You will have heard about how our physical mediums could fall into that ecstatic state by being magnetized. What you may not know is how it actually works. Well, this is what Mesmer discovered. He discovered that within the auric field was a now think of his language in the years that he lived, please. But he thought that within the auric field was a very natural magnetic fluid. And when this fluid was manipulated, then miracles could happen. Of course, in today's world, we know it's not a fluid. We know it is, shall we say, an energy. That's the only way we can describe it today. So all of these people on your screen, Francesca Osterlin, Maria Paradis, and Father Johann Gaston, they all saw, and two of them benefited from seeing Mesmer manipulate the energy field using various different techniques, because eventually he left behind the iron filings and the copper rods, and he started to just use his hands as a conduit to allow this manipulation to take place. And all of these people benefited from that. As you can see there, this is a very old picture, but you can see that he is using his hands to send the patient into a relaxed state. Now, this is a very simplistic picture, because actually the hand movements were a lot more harder than what you're seeing there. They're a lot more involved, and it was Mesmer being actually in the energy field and using his hands to manipulate. And what Mesmer taught us was a few different things, and we're going to look into this in more detail. That the auric field contains a magnetic energy. Now, what do we know about the auric field? Well, we know it's made up of many different levels. Nobody actually knows how many levels. But we know that the last layer of the aura, which I call the spiritual layer, you can give it every name you want, but it's how I refer to it, is what contains the magnetic energy. And it is when this is manipulated, when this is strengthened, that we become better vessels for the spirit world. That is the science behind it. So what we know is, if we can build this magnetic energy, if we can expand it, then the spirit world have a better vehicle to travel in and out of. We know that when the energy is manipulated, i.e. with the passes, that we get miracles can happen, because illnesses, people who are ill, can have their health restored. What we know, and we've known this probably since the Egyptian times, that all illnesses begin in the auric field. Illnesses don't begin in the body. We know the root of all illnesses. Our healers know this and have known this for centuries, that all illnesses begin in the auric field, not the physical self. The Egyptians brought us things like reflexology. The Eastern countries brought us different techniques that affected the meridians of the body, because they knew if they could heal from the auric field, then it would produce a healing within the physical self. Mesmer, without really knowing it, taught us this. He really did. So when we are talking about to our mediums, you have to sit in the power. And the student says, well, what does sitting in the power mean? And a lot of us say, well, it means you charge your battery or what have you. It isn't just that. It's about creating that magnetic energy so the spirit world can have an easier route. Now, I just want to take this a little bit further because I've jumped ahead of myself a little bit, as I often do. But if I take you back to the 1800s, and I talk to you about our physical mediumship, because if you all remember, in the 1800s, all of our mediums were physical mediums, really, or deep trance mediums. And they all had their own personal magnetizer. And what the Mesmer told us was this worked not because of the magnetizer. It wasn't the magnetizer who had any special gifts, if you will, but it worked because of the energy that was in the auric field of the medium. So what we know is that the mediums who have what we call an ample supply of this magnetic fluid within their auric field go on to be our physical mediums. They are the ones, because we know not every medium can be a physical medium. We know that in a room of 100, we're lucky if there's 5. And I mean lucky if there's 5 mediums who can do physical mediumship. So what we know is those who have an ample supply of this magnetic power are the ones who can then become physical mediums. With a professor I was speaking to in America, he actually believes that the spirit world utilized part of this magnetic power in the auric field to create the ectoplasm for physical manifestations to happen. I'm not really sure if that's true because I don't know, but it's feasible to me. We know that there is the mediums who don't have a great deal of this magnetic power, who haven't worked on it, who haven't built it up, are the mediums who never fully know if they've got the spirit world or they've got the neighbour's dog. They never fully know if they're working with dad or granddad or uncle or the school teacher they once had. And that's because their auric field does not provide the spirit world with enough energy for that connection to happen, for that blend to happen. So if we want to be the best healers, the best mediums that we can be, then we have to work on the vessel. We have to do the, I call it the gym workout. And that means working on building that magnetic energy within the auric field. The same professor who spoke to me about the ectoplasm also offered another very interesting theory. And I'm going to share it with you, but again, I have no idea how true it is. We know that a lot of mediums suffer with different addictions. Mediums throughout the years have been alcoholics or have had problems with gambling and things like this. And what he believes is when this magnetic energy is not understood, so it becomes stagnant within the energy field and not utilized properly, that it then begins to turn inwards, and that's when addictions happen. I can't, again, give you any scientific proof of that, but it's certainly a very interesting thought or an interesting idea. Because the more we understand mediumship and the more we understand how it works and the science behind what we are doing, the more we can use that to look at how mediumship is not working as well as how it is working. So when I'm teaching, I say to the students that a statement I want them to remember is the medium creates the power and the spirit world create the miracle. You know, I say all the time, mediumship is the easiest thing in the world. It really is. There is nothing complicated or hard about mediumship if the medium gets their energy right. So Mesmer, way back then in the 1700s, standing in his beautiful home, a very lonely man because he didn't love his wife, but he very much wanted her money, watching the planets, and just out the blue, he has this thought. Just out of the blue, he comes into his mind, is there a same magnetic pull within people as there is from the moon to the sea? Now we can take that a step further, because I wonder how many of you as mediums get affected, or your energy, the way you work, is affected by the phases of the moon. I know mine is. I know that on a full moon, my mediumship is pretty hot, and on a new moon, I should give up and go and get another job, because my energy fluctuates with the advent of each moon. We've long known about the word lunatic, where lunar, the moon, affects people with mental health issues. My daughter, who's a mental health nurse, has often said when she is in the clinic of an evening or the hospital of an evening and there's a full moon, she finds that the patients become very agitated, and there are a lot more psychosis and psychotic episodes that happen directly because of the effect of the moon. So if we can start to look at what that does to us within our mediumship, if we can start to look at how this energy field within our energy field is reacting, then we start to understand more fully where our mediumship is hit and miss and why it's hit and miss. We start to understand more fully what it is we are offering to the spirit world so that they can do the reunion they need to do. And I don't know if Mesmer, who, there was once just useless information really, but there was once a university actually dedicated to him in Germany. And when he became disgraced, and he did die penniless, but when he became disgraced, the university was closed down and his name was struck off. But Mesmer's theory, for me, tells us a lot about how the magnetic energy flows through us and how with manipulation it can have an effect. Now, going back to our magnetizers, because I went off track a little, they would use magnetic passes of various types over the medium. Now, these magnetic passes were not instant. They didn't just fall into trance instantly. Some of these magnetizers had to do this for several hours at a time. There is a very interesting story that all magnetizers in the 1800s were men. And when I ask the students, why do you think that is? And they say, well, because of the times and it was not proper for women to be magnetizers. It's not true. The reason why magnetizers were men primarily was because they were considered the stronger sex. So they had the most energy to keep these passes going over many hours, because our mediums would have to sit there until that effect took hold, and then the magnetizer could withdraw. I tried in various places to find some information on magnetic passes that showed you them, and I couldn't find anything. I'm sure there is, I just couldn't find them. And so I asked the spirit world to show me some passes, which they did, and I share a couple of them with the students I teach, because a couple of them are quite simplistic and they can feel the effect. but one or two of them are quite brutal and quite invasive and can have quite a nauseating effect if your energy field isn't powerful enough. So there is it's wonderful to play with it a little bit and to see the effect it has. How can Mesmer's technique be used in today's world, especially within the healing? If we look at it in the mediumship, I've spoken at length about that, about using it to strengthen the energy field to be a better vessel. I have students in Holland and in Switzerland who have used this technique in a healing way to do healing on animals as well as on their patients, where they can produce a meditative effect, almost a relaxation effect, so that the patient can be less stressed and then the healing can take hold. Because we know that healing happens inside out. You know, we know that the spirit world will look in healing for the root of the problem, not the cause. Okay, so what is it? You've got a headache. Okay, you've got a headache. Is it stress related? Is it emotional? Where is the root of that headache? That's what the spirit world are looking for. If the healer can relax the patient, then they can allow that healing energy to have a much greater effect quicker. So I have students who are using it today. They are using it within their practices with animals, with animal healing, to try and produce that healing effect. All of this because of one man. All of this because one man was brave enough to take an idea and to run with it. To take an idea and to say, I'm going to see where this takes me. I asked this professor why he thought he used broken glass and iron filings and copper rods. And he gave me a very scientific answer that with my limited brain I can't relate to you. But apparently it is just about how these elements interact with each other to cause a current that then causes an effect within the body. Now, we could say it's psychosomatic. We could say that he offered, for example, Francesca, he offered her a different way to look at herself other than just being mad because she didn't want to be with her husband anymore. So we could say that he offered her something that appeased her, maybe. Doesn't then quite explain how Maria Paradis got her sight back. It doesn't explain how in countries like Germany and France, and especially in the King's Court in France, he had miraculous healing results. It could not have all been psychosomatic. So when we are talking to our students about sitting in the power, remember that what we are saying is we are manipulating the energy field or strengthening the energy field so the spirit world have a stronger vehicle to come in and out of. Does anybody have any questions on that?
If you want to ask some question, please press the raise hand button. Yes, we have Karin.
Hello, Karen.
Hello. I have a question about the auric field. Is it possible? I've done mediumship for 20 years, but I have a very severe TBI. And somebody told me at AFC, at Shooter, I had a very big auric field. Could it be gone by a fall?
Okay, forgive me, Karen, because you broke up a little, so I missed some of your words. So if I can just repeat back. So you are being told you have a bad auric field?
No, a big.
A big auric field, sorry.
Very, very big.
Your words put up. And what else did you say? I'm sorry, could you just repeat it?
I fell down on my head and my brain, and now a mediumship is so different. And I have the feeling the auric field is something I could do something with. Maybe it's gone, maybe it's not gone, but it's not that large as it has been before, I think. But it's very interesting what you told us. It's not an illness, it's something what has happened, it's an accident. But I guess Spirit World can do something about it as well. And I would like to know how I can do something in my auric field to let my healers work at it.
Okay, so look, Karen, let's look at this for a little bit. First of all, you're right, it's not an illness, it's an effect from an accident. Yeah. So you must, responsibly, you must stay with your doctor's advice and what doctors tell you. You must do that. But when we're looking at what's happened to you, there will be a shock to the physical and mental part of your energy field. Okay? So a good healer will be able to sense that those two aspects of your auric field are weakened slightly. Your spiritual aspect of your auric field, which we know can extend further than any other layer of the auric field, it has no restriction, will not be damaged. Does that make sense? So it could be that your confidence has dropped a little. It could be that, I don't know how long ago this accident happened, but it could be your confidence has dropped a little, and it could be that there's a little bit of insecurity from sitting with the spirit world. But what I would say to you, sit with them, sit in the power, and then when you can feel the expansion of your energy field, invite the healing spirits in and say to them, come help.
You are muted, Karin.
Hello?
Karin, now we can hear you.
Yeah. I have a very strong tinnitus in my right ear. I'm totally deaf there. And that's a problem for me now. It's 4 years ago it happened. I do my best to sit in the power, but it's not easy with a noise all the time.
But the more you strengthen the auric field, the less the physical aspect impinges on what we do. It doesn't go away, we just become less aware of it, okay? So what I would look at, Karen, is how you are sitting in the power, what technique you are using. Because, I remember some years ago at the Arthur Findlay College, and a wonderful medium who is no longer with us. But she said to me, I've got to demonstrate now, but I have a headache and I don't feel well. But it's okay because the spirit world will remove the headache when I work. She did an amazing demonstration. Then when she came off the platform and we went into the medium's room for a cup of tea, she said, oh, the spirit world have given me my headache back. And I thought, that's strange. If they could remove it, why have they given her it back? And of course, that isn't what had happened. She'd enlarged her auric field and gone into the power that she had lost the sensation of the physical self. When she'd finished her work and the energy field retracts, if you will, or shrinks back, then she become aware of the physical self again. So what I'm saying to you is when you sit in the power, that physical sensation should lessen. It won't leave, but it should lessen. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but I'm struggling now how to use what technique.
Experiment, my darling. There are hundreds of techniques. Every medium has created their own. So experiment with the one that works for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
You're welcome, my darling. And good luck. And if it's okay with you, I'll put you on my healing list too.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did we have another hand there?
Yes. Hello.
We can't hear you, Daniela.
Daniela, you're on mute.
Sorry. Anne-Marie, sorry, you are unmuted now.
Anne-Marie, hello Anne, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, my darling. Do you have a question?
Well, yes, I think I do. I'm very interested about the sort of timeline of this happening because round about the time that John Elliotson was dealing with his epileptic patients, that, if I'm right in thinking, was approximately or just a short while after the treatment of psychiatric patients changed, because Bedlam closed in London in the late 1700s. And with Mesmer's notion of running water being beneficial, I was just wondering if this had a wider impact on our treatment of psychiatric patients, because a lot of, I'll call them asylums, psychiatric hospitals, were built in very countrified areas with you know, near water, with lots of trees and grass and
Eventually,
so,
yes.
So I'm just wondering if he has, Mesmer has had a greater effect on the way we treat people with psychiatric conditions.
I'm absolutely convinced of it, and because when this came, and remember it came almost by the back door, Mesmer didn't bring it to England, it was brought by Dupotet. Although the epilepsy was still regarded as mental illness, if you will, because of Mesmer's technique being passed over to Elliotson, it opened people's minds to how we did treat people with psychiatric problems. And although the Bedlam, if you will, was closed down, there were other institutions that were still in operation very covertly, you know. People didn't want to admit they had an insane child that wasn't insane but was epileptic.
Or inconvenient.
Very much, absolutely. Because remember, England was very much about the upper class and keeping appearances, etc., etc. So I very much believe that Mesmer had all these other strands that came from his technique that alerted to us to the need to open our eyes and change.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Anne-Marie.
We have Ricky now. Please, Ricky.
Karen, if I may, I'm a hypnotherapist as well as a medium. So for tinnitus, if you can find a really good hypnotherapist in your area that can work, that are specializing in tinnitus, that could be completely eliminated. Many reasons for tinnitus, not necessarily on a physical level, if you've checked it with your physician, but find a good hypnotherapist that can work with the tinnitus, or at least decrease the decibel of it. It is absolutely possible to eliminate it for you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, we studied mesmerism through the hypnotherapy school as well. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah.
And it talks about the fluidity. There is a fluidity of magnet around you. So when that fluidity is broken by just literally, when I was in Stansted 2 years ago, Janet Novak got us to do an exercise with mesmerism, and she just got us to go around the body like this to straighten up and to smooth all the energy, and it was fascinating, very fascinating.
And again, you see the word, the fluidity within the energy field. We know it's not fluid. We know it is energy. Yes. And it is the language we use, if you will. But that sweeping effect is very much a more modern technique or a modern day pass than what they did use back in the 1800s, which were a bit more invasive and a bit more brutal in a sense. But very much like when we hold a baby that's crying and we move our hands across their body, you know, it's the same effect. It's that soothing effect, isn't it, that takes hold. Some people have said that mesmerism was the early or the onset of hypnotism. I disagree. And the reason I disagree is, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, my love, because you're the expert here. In my understanding, hypnotism is about planting suggestions within the subconscious and working with the conscious and the subconscious mind. Mesmer's theory was about manipulation. So it wasn't about suggestion like hypnotherapy is.
The part with mesmerism and hypnosis is that you go into a trance-like state, so then you can access the subconscious mind. So they use this technique in order to access the subconscious mind. But it wasn't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But in my opinion only, it cannot have been the early start of hypnotism or the beginning of hypnotism, because hypnotism is suggestion and mesmerism was manipulation. But that's just my theory, you know, I just, that's how I see the difference. Was there another question, Daniela?
Yes, it's Johnny.
Hello, Johnny.
Talk, and just like Ricky, I'm also a hypnotherapist. So I think that the subject is very interesting. You know, through hypnosis and to induce someone into a hypnotic state, we focus on lowering the brainwave frequencies to access the subconscious mind, which you just talked about. But I'm kind of curious, does spirit utilize our subconscious mind to communicate or impress upon us, you know, their thoughts, feelings, etc.? Do you have an opinion on that?
Absolutely, Johnny. Now, Johnny, you will be able to help me more with the official language here, if you will, because I'll be very basic in how I put things. But in your subconscious, Johnny, there is the, shall we say, the library of your life, the experiences of life. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's where it is held, if you will. So we know that when the spirit world connect to the medium, the spirit world know they have a short time to get their message out there before the medium's brain starts to interfere. The conscious mind starts to interfere and take over. So the easiest way, the quickest way for the spirit world to do it is to process through the subconscious, to look in the library of the medium and to raise up the memory that is important for them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So, for example, I might be giving a message to somebody and I might get a very powerful impression of my mom. Now, it doesn't mean my mum is there from the spirit world, but I need, as the medium, then to feel into that image to see what is prevalent about my mum, what is strong. Is it the way she looked? Is it how she died? Is it her connection to me? And that is what the spirit world is using to get their information out there. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So the spirit world use the subconscious mind of the medium constantly. And you'll hear mediums, especially student mediums, who'll say, I really regret doing this in my life, or I didn't have a great childhood and I wish I could eradicate that memory. And from one who didn't have a great childhood herself, I say to them, why do you want to do that? Because all that life's experience becomes the spirit world's library to use. And the more life experience you have stored within you, then the more the spirit world can utilize. Does that make sense, Johnny?
It does. Thank you. It's very interesting. And, you know, also regarding trance mediumship, I'm curious to, you know, if you use a hypnotic induction to get someone into that trance state, if that would be helpful to help someone get into a trance mediumship state. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a great question. And there's something I'm going to say here, and I just want you to try and be patient with me with it. What is the difference between trance and hypnosis? What do you think the difference is?
That's what I don't know yet. I'm trying to explore and understand. Yeah.
So let me just expand on that slightly. You can put, I would imagine, because you sound like what you do, you're very good at, you could put anybody into a hypnotic state of some kind, okay,
Sure.
some level. But that doesn't necessarily mean they will become a trance medium, because trance is only trance when the spirit world is present.
Right.
Okay? And not everybody can be a trance medium or a physical medium, but I would imagine most people can be put into some kind of hypnotic state. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you have an ability with trance, then absolutely hypnotic techniques will help that process. But just by going into a hypnotic state doesn't necessarily mean you will be in the company of the spirit world.
Right, they still have to show up.
The spirit world, there still has to be that ability within the medium.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We have another question. Mike.
Hello, Jackie. The questions I want to ask you, it may seem simple, but I'm sort of, shall we say, new into spiritualism. I'm trying to learn. I don't know which direction I'm going in. But two things that have come to my mind out of your lecture there. You're talking about the auric field, and I listened to Karen with interest, saying that she had a very large auric field. How do I know how large my auric field is, or how do I learn? Is it a medium that will tell me?
Okay.
And the second, the second question is, you talk about you mentioned techniques of getting into the power. Now I sit in a circle and I do what I think is getting me into the power. But if there are techniques, what sort of techniques were you actually referring to?
Okay, good. So let's go to your first question first, because I'll forget.
Sure.
So when we talk about the auric field, and we talk about if somebody has a large or a small or a this or a that auric field, and this is only a personal opinion, Mike, you've got to remember that. I can only share with you my understanding.
Okay.
I don't believe there is a measuring stick. I don't believe there is a way we can tell. I believe that what mediums do is they can feel how somebody's auric field is, okay? But I don't believe they can say, well, yours is bigger than yours or whatever that is, okay? I believe it is an intuition almost. And just to say to you, sorry, I'm backtracking a little bit. Remember as well, Mike, spiritualism is the religion.
Yes.
Mediumship is the science within that. So it's a different thing altogether. So I don't believe we can measure the auric field in that sense. What I do know is that some people have stronger energy field than others, okay? And that's a different thing.
Is it something that can be developed then, or is it just you've either got the size that you
well, this is what I'm coming into.
Oh, right.
Because I think it was the 1970s, I may be wrong with the timeline there, so forgive me, but there was a wonderful, wonderful medium who is now in the spirit world called Glyn Edwards. Most of you will remember Glyn. And he went to a physical mediumship night, and the spirit world said, for those of you who are teachers here this evening, do not teach your students meditation, for it does not help us. Teach them the art of sitting in the power, for that does help us. So it became, from Mesmer's teaching, it became a lot more fashionable from then on, because Glyn championed it. Glyn brought it back into the fold, if you will. I teach it very simply. I just teach about using the breath, focusing on the light, expanding out. Others have more complicated ways of teaching it. And it's not right or it's not wrong. But what each teacher does is they teach it how it works for them, because we can only do it by our own self. But I believe the more we sit in the power, the more we work on that in the energy field, the stronger the energy field becomes over time. So I do believe we can increase that magnetic power, if you will, and strengthen the vessel for the spirit world to use. I don't believe it's a gift some have and others don't. I believe it's a mechanical ability that we can all do. The problem is keeping the discipline of it going, you know? I mean, I call it a gym workout, because it is like going to the gym. If you want to achieve the perfect body, which I don't do, then you're going to keep going to the gym to perfect that. If you want to achieve the right auric field for the work you're going to do, then you will sit in the power to perfect that.
Is there a subtle difference then between sitting in the power and meditation?
Yeah, and I personally believe students, especially in the early days, need both. But for me, meditation is the training of the brain to follow a direction, if you will. So
Right.
most meditations will take you on a journey. So if my dad comes to you, Mike, and wants to give me a message, it's important that you as the medium can follow my dad's story. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If your brain is going to jump off into 100 different directions, you're never going to tell his story, you'll tell me yours. So meditation is good for getting the brain trained to follow that journey. But if the energy field is weak, then my father has nothing to link to get his message out. You know, you'll have seen it yourself, I'm sure, where you get the medium who says, I have a man here, he could be a fatherly figure, granddad maybe, not sure, and before he died he stopped breathing. Can anybody take this man? To the medium, and I'm hamping this up, but to the medium with a strong energy field who says, I've got your dad died of a heart attack, your dad had this personality, your dad worked in this profession. A medium who can fire out the facts and the evidence shows me a medium who has worked on their energy field so that spirit person can perfect their blend. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's how the reunion happens, to somebody who sends their recipient home with a jigsaw and says to them, you put the jigsaw together yourself, you know?
Okay. Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome, Mike. And good luck with your development.
Thank you.
We have another question. The last one, I think, Jack, is Tommy Paolo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Tommy.
Hi, can you see me?
I can't, my darling. Oh, yes, I can. Hello, Tommy. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you. I would like to share something. Something interesting happened to me. I was in a restaurant. It was in December, and it's a special restaurant where you can choose things on buffet, and then they give you a card, and then the card is charged, and then at the end you go to the cashier and you pay for what you've eaten. Okay, and it happened twice that I was at the cashier and the card was empty, and the cashier said, I can't believe it. It doesn't happen. It should be. The question is, that happened on Saturday evening, and on Friday evening, I usually do sit in the power. So could be a relation between sitting in the power and that this magnetic influence on things.
Yeah, so let me just tell you about that. So firstly, I just want to say, Tommy, I'm very impressed that you have restaurants open. I wish we did.
No, it was in December.
Oh, okay. I thought you said Friday.
This year.
Sorry. So I remember a story Minister Judith Seaman told us many years ago about how, and she was very actively at that time working with her trance and physical mediumship. And she said every time she goes to the supermarket, the belt that you put your food and everything on and the scanner would never work. And it was all to do with the reaction of the energy field. Now, this is my point about people with a lot of that magnetic energy. It has an effect on other electrical things, if you know what I mean. So people will find their TV doesn't work, or their radio doesn't work, or the light bulbs blow and things like this. And they put it down to the spirit world, when a lot of the time it is just their energy field. Okay, so Judith Seaman told us that story, and it stuck with me because it showed me then that there is that effect that can be had if your energy field is heightened and magnetized with the impulses.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Thank
get
you.
somebody else to pay next time you go to the restaurant.
Yes. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so Jackie, thank you very much. A wonderful evening with you. So interesting and so many beautiful answers to interesting questions. And on behalf of everyone here, and we are a lot, thank you very much. I would like
Thank you for
to,
asking me.
this recording will be available on YouTube in the next few days on SNUI Film channel. So you could enjoy again this talk with Judith.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It was truly a pleasure to have you here, and we hope to have you here again.
Can I just add something, Daniela? Can I just say to all of you listening who have an interest in mediumship, be the scientist. Go out and experiment till you find your truth. Go out and check things out. Don't be a sheep and follow others, but ask yourself, is this my truth? And how can I experiment to find my truth? Because that's what Mesmer did, that's what our pioneers did, and it's what we don't do enough of in today's mediumship world.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie.